This is a special day here at Exeter. It's important to all of us who are in the room. This day is unique because, unlike in past years, this is the first year where we don't have students that were born in 2001, September 11th. And so this is a new journey for us in that respect. And today is a ceremony that both remembers the loss and the tragedy of that day, but also celebrates the amazing heroism and service of the men and women who served that day and every day since. And so you have always just been so amazing as an audience, and it's part of our responsibility to help you guys understand why we commemorate this day, and to help you understand some of the changes that have been enacted in your lives and have impacted you, some of which you don't even know, all because of that day. So, welcome, and at this point we will begin our ceremony. I'm going to introduce Dr. Wright, who will begin our legacy ceremony.
To have such a rich legacy of service right here in Exeter Township, to our country, to our community, and to one another. I am proud to say that the next generation is poised to take their place. If you would please direct your attention to the flags at the end of the court as we celebrate the passing of wisdom across generations of service. Staff Sergeant Robert Hodson is in his 11th year serving with the Army National Guard. In 2012, he was deployed to Kuwait as part of the 104th Cavalry and is currently a recruiter in Berks County. Chief Robert Jordan has served as a firefighter for over 45 years, 20 of those as the fire chief, and has been involved with numerous life-saving operations. Sergeant Austin Hutchins served as a Marine for the last 7 years. During his service, he was stationed at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina and Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. He is now serving as a recruiter for Berks County. Chief Wendell Morris is a native of Chester County and a graduate of the FBI Academy. Chief Morris is in his 26th year serving communities, first as a state trooper, then as the director of the Bureau of Integrity and Professional Standards with the state police, and now in our community as the chief of the Exeter Police. Gavin West is a senior at Exeter and represents the next generation of military service. After graduating, he plans to enlist with either the Army or the Marines. Oliver McQuaid, who is a junior at Exeter, is representing the next generation of first responders and is serving his first year with the Exeter Fire Department. Would you please rise and join our very talented Eagle Airs led by Mrs. Combs in the singing of the national anthem.
Have you seen my
are fortunate to have many wonderful people here today who have given their lives to service. And we here are celebrating first responders and members of the military today. But I would also like to thank Senator Swank for joining us as well today, who has just been a real advocate for education in this county and in the state. And I would invite her to come to the podium to say a few words. If you would just give her a warm welcome.
Thank you, and good morning, students. I'm so pleased to be here. I've attended this event several times, and you are one of the few school districts, at least in my legislative district, that have a program such as this. And I'm so glad that you do, because you often hear the words never forget in terms of 9/11. And your faculty, your school board, your administrators truly understand that it's important, and especially now, as this is a watershed year, right? How many of you were even alive when 9/11? You weren't born, most of you, with a few exceptions, and some of the older ones among us perhaps. But it's important that we don't forget. And to not forget, we have to hear the stories, we have to understand exactly what happened, and think about the changes that have come in our life, and also what we do to continue to respond to those changes. When 9/11 occurred, I was a county commissioner, meaning I was one of the leaders for the county. And I can recall that morning so clearly. Almost every adult you'll talk to will tell you they know exactly where they were and what they were doing when 9/11 occurred as the events unfolded throughout that particular morning. And I remember that we learned, as leaders of the county, we learned about that event by watching national TV. That has changed significantly. Since then, so many things have been put in place in terms of communication and the kinds of protocols that we need to help react to events such as 9/11. That was the first attack in my lifetime on American soil, and nearly 3,000 lives were lost as a result of that. So other changes that occurred, things such as you may know when you go to the airport, you have to go through those long lines in security. It wasn't really exactly like that before 9/11. That was one of the changes that we certainly have seen. We know that almost 400 first responders passed away, died in service to our country, and selfless service to try to save others as a result of 9/11. And because of that, I have seen certainly that there's a new appreciation and understanding and respect for our first responders, for our police, for our firefighters, for our EMTs, for some of the folks that put themselves on the line to help save others. And I also recall from that day the fact that immediately after that, so many of our fire companies came forward to the county and first responders and said, we want to go to New York. We want to do something to help. So these are some of the changes that we've seen as a result of 9/11. And I hope that you will also understand some of the changes that we saw immediately was a new rededication to patriotism. A lot of people were, waving the flag, wearing the pin of the flag, and proclaiming what it meant to be a citizen of the United States. That certainly changed then, but I think I've seen changes since then that indicate that maybe we've lost some of that fervor, that dedication, understanding that to be a country, to be the United States of America, to be who we need to be as a people, and to continue to respond and be a leader and a beacon of light in the world, we have to do many things differently than we have before. We have to rededicate ourselves to that patriotism and that idea of being a citizen. And I want to read this quote from President Barack Obama. He said this just a few years ago. This is why it's so important today that we reaffirm our character as a nation, a people drawn from every corner of the world, every color, every religion, every background, bound by a creed as old as our founding, e pluribus unum, out of many we are one. It's especially heartening for me to see young people like you here today commemorating this watershed event in our history, and it gives me confidence that our future is in very good hands, and renewed hope that perhaps your generation will do a better job than we have so far in ending hatred, violence, and promoting peace in our own communities and among the peoples of the world. Again, thank you so much for allowing me to be here and be a part of this with you today. God bless you. Thank you.
Our next speaker, I am very excited to have here today. I was telling the school board last night as we were having a board meeting and inviting him out today that this guy is the real deal. He was at ground zero. He was on the pile working with first responders who were risking their lives and working themselves to death to save their comrades, to find those who were lost, to recover bodies for their families so that they can have a proper burial. So he was there when all that happened. He was on the ground. And so I'm very excited that you have an opportunity to hear from him today, just a message of service and a little bit of his story. I'm not going to tell a lot more than that. At this time, I'd just like to invite Dr. Timothy Rain to the podium. If you would give him a nice warm welcome.
Thank you very much. This is such an honor to be here, you guys. I have been here before to speak in Mrs. Lake's class and Mrs. Wenzel's class, and it's always a pleasure to be around Exeter students. My thanks also to the administration and the school board for having me here. Again, it's such an honor. And Jason Dean, I've never been called the real deal before. And that was pretty neat. I worked at Ground Zero in October of 2001. I'm from New York City. I grew up in New York City. It's my hometown. And I was recovering from knee surgery. That day, that morning, I had the television on, and that's when I saw the towers get hit. And it had a profound effect on me. I am a trauma psychologist. I work with first responders. I've previously worked with a lot of police officers who have been through traumatic events. So I thought I could use my expertise and experience to help out in my hometown. I called the 1-800 number that was scanning across the bottom of the television that was looking for doctors to come down and be part of the rescue effort. I called for 4 hours, and finally someone answered, and they asked me who I was and what my expertise was, and I told them that I was a trauma psychologist, and they said, well, sorry, we need emergency room docs and surgeons. I said, well, let me give you my name anyway. And I did. And 2 weeks later, they called me up and said, we'd like you to come and go through the process. After a series of interviews in Philadelphia, they told me that they were going to have a presence, that would be the American Red Cross, would have a presence there of psychologists for the following year. So would I be willing to go anytime in the following year? And I said, of course. That's why I volunteered. 2 days later, they called me. And a day later, I was on a train to Brooklyn, where we were deployed from the Brooklyn Red Cross. And I happened to be deployed to the pit the digging area, which was 6 stories high at the time, burning. And I was there with 5 other psychologists from around the country, from the 4 to midnight shift. We were there to listen, we were there to help, and we were there to assess the emotional stability of the firefighters. We were on the pile because there were caverns that went deep into the basement of the World Trade Center where firefighters would come up and they'd say, I was just down in a break room and there's snack machines, there's coffee cups with still half coffee in them. We know that there's still people alive. And they would get emotionally moved. The last thing that we wanted were more casualties. And so they had to be emotionally stable to continue the recovery effort. When they brought us in a van into the pit area, there were 20-foot high chain link fence covered with canvas, so you really couldn't see much inside. When they opened the gates, I leaned forward and I looked out the front window and I nearly threw up. I'm not a particularly anxious person, but I became scared for me. I started to say to myself, are you going to be able to do this? The devastation was unbelievable and indescribable, and I won't even get into details because I don't want that stuff in your head. But as I was thinking about myself and my ability to be able to do this, I looked around the van and I saw the same expression on everyone else's face that was in the van. And suddenly me turned to we. We were in this together. We were going to be able to do this and get through it together. And that gave me so much strength. I learned so much from my colleagues. It was amazing. I'm going to share with you one experience I had with a police officer. In some respects, that area, 10 by 13 football fields, was one of the most safe places in the world to be, and at the same time one of the most dangerous places in the world. We would get a map every day that would show the structures, these skyscrapers that were in jeopardy of falling, of huge particles of these buildings falling. They had codes spray painted on the side so we knew what buildings to stay clear of, what buildings were compromised. We got reports every day of the toxic fumes and so forth that were coming from various areas of the digging area. And I was on patrol one day, walking around the perimeter, checking on the police officers that were standing guard of the perimeter about every 100 yards or so. And I saw this one young police officer. He couldn't have been more than 22, 23 years old. And he just was staring straight ahead where the towers were. And I approached him and I said, "Hey, you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, sure, I'm okay." And I said, "Man, you don't look okay." And he said, "Well, I'm just trying to make sense of all of this." I said, "Were you down here the day the towers went down?" He said, "Well, my job was to put cones where the bodies hit the ground of the people that jumped from the towers." Now, he went into some detail to share with me what he saw and what he experienced doing that. But in the process of putting those cones down, one of the towers started to collapse. And he ran for his life and dodged into an alley. And he told me that he was literally scooping ash out of his mouth in order to breathe. But he was back at the pit, guarding the pit. And so I said to him, "You're trying to make sense of this." He says, "Yeah, I don't understand it, Doc. I can't believe that this has happened." And I said, "How long have you wanted to be a police officer?" And he said, "I've wanted to be a police officer ever since I was a little kid." And I said, "So why are you trying to be a philosopher or a politician?" He said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, why are you trying to figure out something to try to make sense out of something that doesn't make sense? Why don't you just go back to being a cop? Because that's what you always wanted to do. Because I'm not seeing you doing patrol out here. I'm seeing you staring into space trying to make sense of something that's senseless." And he looked at me and he smiled. And he didn't respond at all, but he stopped staring off into space. And I continued my patrol around the perimeter, but I damn well made sure that I came back to check on him. And when I did, guess who was walking around guarding the perimeter? He was. And I touched base with him, and he expressed that he was pretty grateful that I had intervened. And that's just one story of dozens and dozens of stories that I can tell you of courage that I experienced. On my last day, I was heading up to our hotel on 59th and 9th, beautiful hotel. It was like I came from hell and I went up to heaven. There's some fantasy land there. But before I got there, before I got onto the subway and left the smells and the sounds and the searchlights and the machinery and my colleagues, I stood at the edge of the pit and I started to cry. And my colleague put his arm around me and he said, "Tim, it's going to be okay, man. You're part of history. You're part of history. There's only a couple of thousand people that have been in here working. You're part of history." And you know something, you guys? That's not why I was crying. I was crying because I left a community, a sense of connection that I had never, ever experienced in my life. And that's what 9/11 did to New York and to a certain extent our country. It brought us together in ways we've never been connected before. You know, I once heard that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is self-centeredness. And I could not have been in a more loving community. There was not a single person that ever said no. They always were there for each other, and it was amazing. And after that, I got enlisted, and I have since been to crisis and disasters around the world, and I've continued my humanitarian work because I guess I just kind of became addicted to that sense of community and that love that you experience when you give back and give to another human being. So with that in mind, please try to remember at least a little bit of what I told you and share that with someone at some point, because I'm going to leave you with two words, and two very, very important words. Never forget. Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this time, I would like to invite Brandon Robbins to come forward, and he is going to be playing Bach's Fifth Cello Suite, the Allemande, as we pause and take a moment for some silent reflection. Silent reflection. Thank you, Brandon. In talking with Dr. Ring the other day, and I was thanking him for his service, he said, oh, you know, you always get more than you give. So I have found that to be true in my life, and I know that those that have served and that are sitting here that we're honoring today have felt that in their lives. And so it is my encouragement to you to find an opportunity in some way to serve each other and your community, perhaps even your country. But I would at this time like to ask those who serve either as a first responder, fire, EMS, police, the military, active, retired, if you would please stand so that we can just show our appreciation. Right. I've never met a one that does it for the thanks, but so proud of our Exeter community that we know how to do good thank you. One of those members of our community is going to be recognized today. And although 9/11 is certainly a time to remember the tragic loss of life, it is also an opportunity to reflect on the everyday heroes that serve our community and our country. This year, we would like to honor the Chief of Exeter's Fire Department, Chief Robert Jordan. When I say he's been at it a long time, he's been at it a long time. I think that it all started when he was 6 and he took his parents' hose to put out the barbecue. I don't know that that story is true, but I do know what is true is that he has spent 45 years as a firefighter. His first assignment was in the city of Reading, when he then transferred to the Exeter community, where he has spent the last 40 years serving our community as a firefighter, and the last 20 years as fire chief. He has led the effort to combine the Stonersville and Riften fire companies, which is now what we know the Exeter Township Fire Department. He has impacted the community in more ways than I can count, and continues to be a source of knowledge to our community, and specifically to our school district as we gather to plan how to keep you guys safe and healthy in our community in all events. And so I've really appreciated his friendship and his leadership and his wisdom. In addition to all those things, he is a devoted husband and a father to 4 wonderful kids and 7 grandkids. And so if you would just join me in giving him a nice thank you and congratulations. There's some additional thank yous are needed today. I will start by saying thank you so much to our school board for their support, and for our superintendent, Dr. Phillips, our assistant superintendent, Dr. Winters, Mr. Campbell, the building principal, who's been phenomenal and just such a welcome addition here, Dr. Wright for helping me pull this off. And I'm going to say most importantly, we have Emergency Services Club with Mrs. Lake as the advisor, who have just been fantastic. They're responsible for all the decorations that you see and helping to make this a success. So thank you to the Emergency Services Club and Mrs. Lake. If you are interested in joining such a club, please see her. Little plug. And thank you. Custodians and the teachers who just helped me and Dr. Wright and everybody else pull this off, and their support and their flexibility and their understanding. I appreciate that so much. And just as a final word to you, today is 9/11, and although there's these sad moments, there's a lot of great moments, and there's a lot of great people standing in front of you who serve. As you see people in your community, especially today, if you see someone who is a first responder, a member of the military, please extend a thank you for their service. It costs a great deal in time and energy and just emotional well-being sometimes. And so please just pay that forward if you would. And again, a final thank you to you, Dr. Ring, for sharing your story with us today. This concludes our ceremony.